Tonight, a shocking series of broad daylight assaults in Darwin's north leaves shop owners considering their future. Good evening, I'm Kyle Dowling. This is ABC News, Northern Territory. Also tonight, a deal struck in Canberra for aged care reform, with some retirees about to pay more for their own care. The NT government says they'll scrap Labor's plan to demolish Anzac Oval in Alice Springs, but say they'll still build an art gallery. And more death and destruction in Gaza, with Israeli airstrikes on a UN school killing dozens, including 6 UN staffers. A Darwin barber has spoken out after a customer was stabbed outside his Nightcliff business in what appears to be a random attack. 3 other people were also assaulted, with a 24-year-old man now in custody over these series of assaults. As Crime Squad detectives investigate, charges are pending. Matt Garrick reports.
A sprint from police, moments before this alleged offender pulled out a knife in a Nightcliff barbershop.
The knife's this long. And I'm going, oh, whoa, take it easy, calm down. You don't need a knife, what's going on? He dropped the backpack and he went out the door.
Tony Murko today trying to comprehend how his suburban business was late yesterday afternoon turned into a crime scene, with a customer on his way to get a haircut stabbed outside the shop.
And this guy's run at him, slashing at him, and I'm going, grab the phone, 000, I'm running out there. And I've been stabbed. So by that time I've got the guy, pulled him in here. We've got tissues and paper towels on his wound, and it looked about 1.5 inches long. And he's starting to go white, and blood's on the floor.
After the incident, the victim was treated in Royal Darwin Hospital for a stab wound to the abdomen. Police say 2 men and a woman were also assaulted by the man in the alleged crime spree, all receiving minor injuries.
It's unsettling, but I do feel very safe in Nightcliff and in where our shop is. And yeah, such a beautiful community here, and I just hope that more things can be done to just ensure that the community is well resourced and safe.
Tony Murko's been in business in Darwin for decades. After the dramatic events of yesterday and what he perceives as a rising crime rate in the Nightcliff area, he's questioning if it's time to pack up and leave.
What has it done to the communities? I want to get the hell out of here after 50 years. I can't stand this place anymore.
Police say there's no indication any of the victims were known to the attacker, and detectives have not yet confirmed if they believe drugs or a mental health condition played a role. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
A report will be prepared for the coroner after a 50-year-old man who was seriously injured in an altercation in Darwin's northern suburbs last week died in hospital. Police allege the man assaulted a taxi driver in Casuarina after exiting the vehicle with a female family member. The 25-year-old driver then allegedly struck the man, who fell backwards and hit his head. The driver allegedly moved the man from the roadway and spoke with the man's family member before leaving the scene in the taxi. The man was taken to hospital in a serious condition and died yesterday. Police say the taxi driver is assisting with their inquiries and has not been arrested or charged. The Chief Minister has announced her government will scrap Labor's plans to build an art gallery on the Sports Oval in Alice Springs, instead hoping they can have both by building the gallery next to the Oval. Sporting groups are today welcoming the news that Anzac Oval will be saved, but traditional custodians who've been calling for the gallery to be built in a different location for cultural reasons say they won't give up their fight.
This popular sport precinct is here to stay. Under Labor, Anzac Oval was set to be demolished to make way for a multi-million-dollar world-class Aboriginal art gallery. But now, after weeks of speculation and years of community backlash, the new government is ripping up those plans.
What we've seen is division in the community over this gallery. The demolition of Anzac Oval has stopped, and we will look forward to building a fantastic national Aboriginal art gallery around that site.
Welcome news for some locals.
We do a lot of community events at the Anzac Oval, so it's good that they want to save it.
But custodians who've been fighting to protect the area from any development say they're still being ignored.
They're disrespecting an important women's site.
Doris has been leading a campaign to get the gallery built in a different location to preserve history.
It doesn't belong here on our women's site. We have our stories that's been here for thousands of years.
The years of uncertainty about the development have left sporting groups in limbo. Today, they're celebrating the return of their home ground.
We've gone from 700, 800 participants in our sport down to maybe a combined 300 between rugby league and rugby union. It's been a real struggle. Just the fact that we can say the home of rugby league, the home of rugby union is Anzac Oval again is going to take 10 steps forward.
The government's plans follow a review of the controversial project, and while the new government says it will still build the gallery somewhere close to the Oval, exactly where remains in question. Roxanne Fitzgerald, ABC News.
A school in a remote Northern Territory community remains closed more than 2 weeks after an incident at staff accommodation that prompted the evacuation of all teachers. Concerns have been raised in the remote Aboriginal community of Kintor, about 500 kilometres west of Alice Springs, following an attempted break-in at the staff housing on August 28. There have been reports of rising unrest in the community and a concerning spike in petrol sniffing among young people. The Department of Education says work is underway to repair and upgrade the security of the housing and hopes to reopen the school on Monday. More details have emerged about a pair of prisoners who managed to escape from a watch house in Darwin's CBD yesterday. The men used a blunt object to smash their way out of a first-floor cell and used bedding to lower themselves out of the window. They walked from the watch house to Parap, where they stole a vehicle and drove it to Noonamah, where they refuelled using a credit card found in the car. They then drove west towards Wadair before they were intercepted at Bulbul Bridge as police deployed tyre deflation devices. The men fled from the car into nearby bushland on foot, and police dog units were deployed to track them down. They were eventually found trying to flag down vehicles on the side of the road and were driven the 200 kilometres back to Palmerston Watch House. Both men appeared in court today and have been remanded in custody. Former NT Labor Minister Elliot McAdam AM has been remembered at his state memorial as a man of principle with an unwavering passion for change. Mr McAdam's friends and family gathered in Alice Springs to honour the former member for Barkly, who died at the age of 72 in August. Current and former politicians paid tribute to Mr McAdam's tireless advocacy, which earned him an Order of Australia Medal in 2015. In emotional tributes, his family recalled his kindness, generosity and dedication to the community.
From humble beginnings, Dad had a remarkable character of strength and ability to make connections.
Uncle, we say to you, you have set the bar very high. The legacy you have left, your calm nature, your will to thrive, to make things happen, your dry sense of humour.
Many Australians will have to pay thousands more for aged care from July next year, with sweeping changes set to pass Parliament. The federal government and opposition finally reached a deal today aimed at making the system more sustainable, affecting those going into aged care facilities or accessing home care at home. Political reporter Evelyn Manfield reports.
After months of negotiations,
we're announcing the greatest improvement in aged care in 30 years.
Those already in the system won't have to pay more, but new entrants will face changes from next July. For example, a fully supported pensioner with few assets would pay up to $300 more, a part pensioner who owns a home up to $4,700 more, while a self-funded retiree could be hit with an extra $13,400 more a year.
Those with means did say they were happy to pay more as long as they could see it was delivering quality services, that there was transparency about where the money was going and that the provider would uphold their rights.
At the moment, we're not building anywhere near the new beds we need. We're closing more than we open and we're not able to refurbish them.
The amount someone spends across their lifetime will be raised too. For non-clinical care, the cap will lift from about $80,000 to $130,000.
The government has agreed to these caps that we've forced them into accepting.
The proposal, which still needs to pass Parliament, will also see a new Support at Home program.
We are re-gearing the entire system of aged care in this country to be about supporting you at home.
The government had promised criminal penalties for providers that allowed or covered up repeated abuse and neglect. But the opposition feared that would spark an exodus, and ultimately Labor wanted bipartisan support. Instead, it's promising civil penalties for providers that breach standards. Yvonne Buter's mother died in aged care after falling out of bed numerous times. Months later, she lost her father after a wound wasn't treated properly.
That people aren't harmed in aged care, that would be the priority. But then if they are, that there are consequences.
Aged care that's safe and sustainable, a major challenge with the number of Australians over 85 set to triple in a generation. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
A small group of Army officers will have their Afghanistan service decorations removed for failing to prevent alleged war crimes during their command. The Defence Minister's long-awaited decision has sparked anger across the veterans community as authorities continue to gather evidence for possible prosecutions. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Government response to the Brereton report? I haven't seen it. Haven't seen it at all?
An international army conference in Melbourne.
We recognise the timeless challenges of land warfare.
Is overshadowed by a long-awaited announcement in Parliament.
This will always be a matter of national shame.
The Defence Minister confirming Distinguished Service medals will be stripped from some current and former commanders who failed to prevent alleged war crimes in Afghanistan.
Combat has shown that our soldiers are capable of great courage and bravery under fire. It has also shown that we can do great wrong on the battlefield.
The decision coming almost 4 years after damning findings of the Brereton report into the conduct of Australian Special Forces soldiers during the war against the Taliban, and just days after the release of the Veteran Suicide Royal Commission.
How insensitive, how bloody insensitive to do this.
The identities of officers being punished are being withheld on privacy grounds, but former Defence Chief Angus Campbell, who first recommended removing medals, will be keeping his own.
It's a small number of people that we are talking about.
His actions today, in effect, spit at the feet of those brave young Australians, the 26,000 of them who went to Afghanistan over 2 decades and put their lives on the line.
That anger is shared widely across Army ranks as, behind the scenes, investigators continue to gather evidence for possible prosecutions, a process the government says could take up to a decade.
The long shadow of Afghanistan will continue to shape the context for our Army for some years to come.
Australia's longest war still has chapters to be written. Andrew Green, ABC News, Melbourne.
Coming up on 7:30 is blast exposure, leaving Navy clearance divers with brain injuries.
They are regularly exposed to blasts both in training environments and when they are deployed.
My long-term memory seems to be okay, but what I did 5 minutes ago I couldn't tell you.
You know something's wrong but you can't put a finger on it.
There is clearly a medical cause for this.
Also, I'll speak to the Minister for Aged Care, Annika Wells.
An Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-aid facility in central Gaza has killed at least 18 people, including 6 UN employees. It's the highest death toll among UNRWA staff in a single incident. The UN Secretary-General says what's happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable. And a warning, this report contains images and details viewers may find distressing.
For the 5th time, a UN school turned shelter in the Nuseirat refugee camp is hit by Israeli airstrikes. A man collects body parts in a plastic bag as he inspects the destruction.
My children are still missing. 4 of my children. I do not know where my daughters are. Where is my wife?
Nearby, first responders try to retrieve the bodies of the Eid family so they can be buried.
The house of our neighbours, the Eid family, was targeted. There were about 7 martyrs, 4 children, 2 women and a young man.
The Nusayrat shelter in central Gaza is one of many run by the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, or UNRWA. It's home to around 12,000 displaced people. UNRWA says 6 of its workers were killed in the strike.
This was the single deadliest day for our agency in the 75-year history. But all told, we've lost 220 of our colleagues to date to this conflict.
The Israeli military says it was targeting Hamas militants planning attacks from inside the school.
We must condemn firmly what was the horrible terror attacks that Hamas has produced. But then afterwards, we have witnessed a series of military interventions by Israel in Gaza with a level of death and destruction that has no parallel in my time as Secretary General.
Gaza's health ministry says more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the war began. Chelsea Edwards, ABC News.
On a joint visit to Ukraine, top diplomats from the United States and Britain have pledged additional aid, but are yet to greenlight deeper strikes into Russia. Kyiv has been pleading with its allies for months to let Ukraine fire Western missiles deep into Russian territory at what is a critical juncture in the war.
Travelling in tandem, America's top diplomat and his British counterpart arrived in Ukraine, a united front.
The United States, the United Kingdom, united for Ukraine.
As the pair met with dignitaries outside a ballistic missile attack set off air raid alarms. A reminder of the constant threat to life in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his newly appointed Foreign Minister urged the two leaders to lift limits on the use of long-range missiles provided by the West.
To defend our people, brave steps from all our partners are necessary.
Kyiv has repeatedly been denied permission to use the weapons to strike deep into Russian territory over concerns it could escalate the conflict. US President Joe Biden has indicated that position may soon change, but not yet. Instead, the US and UK have promised more than $2 billion in additional funds for humanitarian aid and to repair damaged energy infrastructure.
We are having discussions on a range of issues, including the military equipment that Ukraine needs to win.
We want Ukraine to win, and we're fully committed to keep marshalling the support that it needs.
The foreign leaders will now report back to London and Washington before the US President and British Prime Minister meet for talks on Friday. Moscow has vowed to destroy any US missiles sent to Ukraine as Russia's troops continue to make gains in the country's east. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News, London.
A day after the US presidential debate, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have met face-to-face again at a memorial to mark the September 11 terrorist attacks. The two political rivals briefly shook hands in a rare joint appearance with President Joe Biden. Vice President Harris and former President Trump stood together at the Ground Zero site in New York just hours after their first ever debate. Many polls say Kamala Harris was the winner, although Mr. Trump praised his own performance.
When you don't win, it's like a fighter. When a fighter has a bad fight, gets knocked out or loses the fight, the first thing he says is, we want a rematch. So we won the debate according to every poll, every single poll. I think that, are we going to do a rematch? I just don't know.
As voters in Indonesia prepare for regional elections, overdevelopment will be high on the agenda in Bali. Politicians are proposing a temporary ban on new tourism builds as the island grapples with a growing influx of so-called digital nomads and foreign property investors.
It's been voted one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, but Bali's Kelingking Beach is about to undergo a controversial transformation. The local village authorities have brought in a Chinese company to build a 182-metre high elevator and viewing platform.
Once it's built, would you ride on the glass elevator?
No, never.
Never?
Never.
That's how strongly you feel about
never.
it?
Never.
Senator and activist Nilu Jelantic is part of a growing pushback in Bali against what she sees as excessive development. And it's Bali's famous rice terraces where the biggest changes are happening.
Farmers are giving up, growing rice, very little income, and sell the land, tons of money.
There's a villa boom taking place, partly fueled by foreign investors. Conservationists worry that serene inland areas like Ubud might go the way of coastal hotspots like Canggu, where mega clubs and apartment blocks compete for space.
You have a lot of celebrities coming to Bali. It's like the Asian Ibiza at the moment. So people love it.
Sales rep Arthur Richard is from a Ukrainian-owned developer. He says they're employing 900 people and helping Bali's economy. It's a tricky issue for the island's politicians to deal with, given visitors drive up to 80% of Bali's economy.
I think it comes back to if there are people who want to come to Bali, we're not going to reject them, as long as visitors who come follow the rules of Indonesia.
Development will be in focus as Bali's voters choose a new governor in November. Leaders who'll be tasked with trying to preserve the culture and environment of an island that so many people want a piece of. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Bali.
To finance now, and both the local share market and Aussie dollar rose today after a fall in US inflation. Here's Alan Kohler.
Inflation in America isn't quite back to the 2% that the Federal Reserve would like it to be, but it's close and getting there. Headline inflation is down to 2.5%, and core inflation, where they take out food and energy, was steady at 3.2%. A US rate cut, though, seems locked in for next week, but it probably won't be the big one. It'll just be the usual 0.25%. And the only problem America still has with inflation is housing. This chart shows core inflation with and without housing. So what they call shelter inflation, mainly rent, is still above 5%. But the decline in headline CPI was well received by the markets, and the S&P 500 rose 1%, the Nasdaq 2%, and the Nikkei in Japan 3.5%. One negative on the US market last night was Trump Media and Technology Group, the company controlled by the former president that owns his social media thing called Truth Social. It's seen as a way to bet on whether he'll win the election, because if he does, his company will probably make a lot of money. And, well, the price slumped after the debate and Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris. Investors couldn't decide which of those was worse for the Republican candidate. The Australian market zipped up 1% with solid gains by banks and miners. 9 entertainment shares fell quite a lot following the resignation of CEO Mike Sneesby, but that's not very unusual for this stock, especially in the 3.5 years since Mr Sneesby took over in April 2021, since when it has fallen 58%. And that's not normally the thing that encourages CEO longevity. On commodity markets, iron ore and oil and copper went up, gold fell, and the Australian dollar went up because the US dollar fell. And that's finance.
The teams are in for the weekend of AFL finals, with Port Adelaide's Charlie Dixon holding on to his spot and Todd Marshall recalled after playing just one game in 8 weeks. For the Hawks, no late surprises, confirming just one change to their team last night ahead of a big semi-final at the Adelaide Oval tomorrow.
The Premiership Cup was in safe hands as it continued its tour around the country, and one of Hawthorn's most decorated players is backing his former club's chances this weekend.
They're in good form, they're young, they're not afraid, they're going to take the game on.
The team got its first look at Adelaide Oval this afternoon as Jai Sarong was given the nod to replace the injured Sam Frost in the backline. Ken Hinkley was in a daring mood this morning, unconcerned about whether the Hawks would target midfielder Zach Butters' sore ribs tomorrow night.
I say go for it. Zach's a tough player, really tough player. He won't take a step backwards.
The pressure is mounting on the power coach after last week's heavy defeat and a mixed finals record. Whatever happens this weekend, Hinkley says his job is assured.
I'm not going to be a smart ass here in any way, shape or form, but I'm contracted.
The Giants captain has been given his assignment, likely to go up against Brisbane's Brandon Starcevic and needing to lift after a quiet game against Sydney.
He's one of the best players in the competition. We expect him to, to work his way through any matchup that he gets.
And the Lions remain optimistic. Backman Jack Payne will overcome a knee injury in time for the match on Saturday as they fight for a place in a preliminary final.
We're just going to continue to play aggressively, take the game on, put our best foot forward and see what happens.
Erin Marsicovetere, ABC News.
A rapid half-century from Travis Head has helped Australia defeat England by 28 runs in the opening game of the T20 series in Southampton. Head blasted 30 runs off one over from Sam Curran and hit the fastest half-century in a T20 by an Australian against England. He finished with 59 off 23 balls as the tourist posted 179. Australia produced a strong effort in the field to take a 1-0 lead in the three-match series as England was dismissed for 151.
I've worked extremely hard over a period of time to, play a little bit freer, mindset, all those things, and then I'd love to go out and whack it every time. It's not always going to be the case every time. I'm in a nice bit of form at the moment. I want to continue that as a batter.
To the weather now, and tonight's weather pick of a sunset at Mendel Beach has been sent in by Tim Roberts. It was cooler in the south due to southeasterly winds and a cloud band. It was hot and mostly sunny over the top end. 36 for Darwin today, 38 in Bachelor. Zooming out, 37 the top in Katherine, 38 for Jabiru and Borroloola, 38. 27 in Alice Springs, cooler in Yulara, 19 and Tennant Creek, 33. On the satellite, there's a cloud band with thunderstorms stretching across the interior of WA into the southwest of the NT and to the northwest of South Australia. A high in the Great Australian Bight is pushing a southeasterly wind surge through the NT, bringing cooler temps but also increased fire risk in areas. Interstate tomorrow, shower 2 for Hobart, possible shower developing in Melbourne. Cold in Canberra with a low of -1, partly cloudy in Sydney. A shower 2 easing for Brisbane, 18 in Adelaide, partly cloudy and sunny in Perth tomorrow. Back in the NT, 24 with cloud clearing in Alice Springs, Yulara 25, Tennant Creek wind easing and a sunny 29. Heading north, sunny and 36 in Katherine, 37 for Borroloola, Daly Waters sunny and 35. And to the west, 37 in Bachelor and mostly sunny for Darwin tomorrow, reaching 36. Extreme fire danger is forecast for the Darwin and Adelaide River districts tomorrow with hot and dry conditions along with southeasterly winds. There's a low tide tomorrow morning at 6:45 and there's a strong wind warning for the Roper-Groot coast. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:41 and set at 6:43. Hot and dry in Darwin with gusty winds. It will become more humid next week. And sunny and mild conditions for Alice Springs in the days ahead. There is a chance of a shower next week. And stay with us now. Laura Tingle is up next with 7:30. Good night.